When can a ball bearing act as a clock pendulum? All mechanical clocks need some way of keeping time. That is to say, a way of defining the time of passing seconds. This is achieved with a device that vibrates or oscillates at a known rate that can then interact with the rest of the mechanism to pass that information on. The device that makes this possible is called the oscillator. In a mechanical watch, this is the balance. In a quartz watch or even a cheap quartz clock, this is the vibration of the quartz crystal. In a conventional mechanical clock, it is the pendulum. Over the years, there have been many ideas to improve or reinvent this mechanism. One such idea was the use of constant force of gravity. In 1808, a British Army officer, politician and inventor came up with the idea to use the known time it takes a small ball to roll down a path of a specific length as an oscillator for clockmaking. His name was Sir William Congreve. He was in fact not the first person to have this idea, with it being independently thought up by both Nicolas Grolier de Servier and Johann Zeiler. But whilst their work was very important, neither of these came to the final design of the zigzag track and moving table. I don't know whether Congreve knew of these prior inventions or if he was under the impression he was original with his ideas. The zigzag track is necessary to increase the time it takes the ball to travel a distance, and the moving table provides the replacement kinetic energy for the ball to keep rolling. Sir William Congreve was somewhat obsessed with the idea of detaching the pendulum from the clock mechanism as much as possible. This in itself is a fantastic and necessary move to increase the accuracy of a precision clock. Over the years, many improvements, innovations, and inventions were implemented in horology to detach the oscillator, as the highest level of precision is achieved when the pendulum is undisturbed. Ideally, a pendulum would be swinging in a vacuum, with only the slightest push from the mechanism as infrequently as possible to keep it going. But in reality, this is not practical outside of a controlled observatory environment. John Harrison, however, radically changed the received wisdom on pendulum technology in the 18th century, but his ideas were not widely adopted. Oh, what could have been? Keep an eye out on this channel for more on this, as I intend to deep dive into the world of the Harrisonian pendulum in future videos. But for now, back to Sir William. His ideas to detach the oscillator were many and varied, but the most well-known and widely adopted was his rolling ball oscillator and a well-recognized clock design often referred to as the Congreve. The idea is that the zigzag track can be made long enough for the ball to be travelling completely independently of the mechanism for a very long time, in pendulum terms, often 30 seconds, but sometimes as long as a minute. It is only when the ball reaches the end of the track that it begins to interact with the rest of the mechanism. It does this when it completes its run and hits a buffer rod or lever with enough momentum to unlock the escapement. The escape wheel is then allowed to rotate, usually half a revolution, which is enough of a movement to lift up the end of the table, raising the ball up to the height of its start position. The buffer rod is counterweighted, so as it returns to the locking position, it gives the ball a tiny push back down the track to begin another run. All clock escapements are required to perform two critical functions: to control the rate or speed at which the train of gears and in turn the hands rotate, and to provide impulse, a restorative force, transferred from the motive power, the driving weight or mainspring, to maintain the movement of the pendulum or oscillator. The Congreve system achieves both of these functions. the ball takes 30 seconds to run down the track before allowing the escape wheel to rotate half a turn, moving the hands on by 30 seconds. The energy in the mainspring is passed through the train of gears and is used to lift the table back up, elevating the ball and allowing gravity to take over once again. The whole idea could be credited as genius, but the idea is flawed. In theory, the ball runs consistently, but in practice, out in the big bad world, a whole collection of outside forces get involved. The ball and track both get dirty. The nature of the large surface area of the table means it is very susceptible to dust and dirt build-up, which can slow and even stop the revolution of the ball. Temperature change affecting the physical dimensions of the table, in much the same way as a pendulum changes length with temperature change, the table also does so. But because of the large expansive material, the results are extreme. The example in this video has a huge disadvantage that the table is completely skeletonized. So as the table expands and contracts, not only does the ball have a longer or shorter track, but the track itself becomes wider or narrower, causing the ball to rotate on a large or smaller part of its diameter and changing the speed and distance it will roll. Essentially, it is a nice idea on paper, but doesn't amount to good technical improvement to precision horology. However, it was not forgotten. The extremely interesting and even mesmerizing action of watching the ball run caught people's attention, and the design became a popular point of interest. The technology essentially became a gimmick. That brings us to the example I'm working on in this video. It was originally made as an amateur project and probably always had its issues. The current owner bought it in the non-running and somewhat run-down condition you can see at the beginning of the video. My brief was to clean it up and return it to running order, making it as reliable as possible. The movement itself is basically a power unit, and as long as it's capable of lifting the table each beat, it will work. It does, however, need to lift reliably and in as snappy a fashion as possible. I therefore decided to take the time to properly go through the basics and make best use of the power available. Most of the train wheels were set up so that they rubbed against each other and required some time to be spent making spaces to prevent that. The locking pins of the escapement also required attention, as they were small, weak and bent. I made 2 new ones to ensure that they were straight and strong. The rest of the work on the movement was fairly straightforward maintenance work, making sure that the pivots were polished and the bushing was all in good order. I had to drill and pin for the barrel arbor because it was neglected at the time of manufacture, and I didn't consider it safe for the ratchet to be completely free to come off. Even with the power of the mainspring against it, a pin, cross-pinned, is a good idea. The usual attention was given to the mainspring to make sure that it was in good condition and clean and properly lubricated before winding it back into the barrel, ready for use. As you have seen from the video, there were numerous faults that I had to correct. When I was happy with the condition of the movement, it was a case of cleaning and reassembling everything. The basic cleaning work for the rest of the clock was pretty straightforward. Most of the parts were silver plated, so I was able to clean them and repair slight rubs and losses using silvering solutions. I completely dismantled the whole mechanism, including every part of the table. This was important to try and make sure all of the surfaces for the rolling ball were smooth and as well aligned as possible. I noticed when dismantling that quite a few of the triangular shaped sections were bent and needed attention. With the cleaning work complete, I then chose to lacquer with a heavy, clear lacquer to try to preserve the finish for as long as possible, as silver plating is not very good at resisting blackening and tarnishing. The reassembly included quite a bit of fettling to make sure everything sits nicely and lines up. The most of the screws required attention. With both the movement and main parts of the clock restored, it was time to assemble everything into a working clock. The escapement needed a certain amount of adjustment. The counterbalance of the locking lever needed to be just so. You can see here me adjusting the counterbalancing lever so that it snaps back into position and stops the escape wheel abruptly. With the clock in working condition came the drawn-out process of adjusting everything to get it to run as reliably as possible. The adjustments are fairly straightforward if time-consuming and sometimes hard to achieve. The clock must be level in both planes. The table must be level front to back. And the length of the connecting rod must be set so that the table is at the same angle when tilted in both directions. This is later fine-tuned using the microset timing equipment and a computer to set the beat in a similar way to a conventional clock. The timekeeping is adjusted by changing the geometry of the cam that rotates to tilt the table. A steeper tilt will cause a gain, and a flatter tilt will cause a loss. I was happy with the visual results of the restoration, especially when housed in a protective case I made to keep the dust off. The timekeeping and running reliability were, well, as I said earlier, these clocks are more of a gimmick than a precision timekeeper. Thank you very much for watching, and once again a big thank you to everyone who supports my work on this channel by simply subscribing to the channel, liking, commenting, or even directly supporting the videos through Patreon. Thank you all.